Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to St. Michael Church. Thank you for being part of the Women of St. Michael offering. People will just kind of come in as they get here. But this is special. One of the things Women of St. Michael is doing, and they're going to talk about it, is that theme of Bridge the Divide. And so they're inviting us to kind of open our hearts to the places in our community that we can learn about and grow and be stretched. And so for that theme and for the work you're doing, I'm very grateful. I like to say in a moment like this, because some of you are from St. Michael, some of you are not, this is a safe space. It is a church. We have certain things we believe, and at the same time, you're most welcome here. We genuinely want you to feel at home, and so know that this is God's house, and we extend that welcome to you. As we begin, we will say a prayer, because that's what we do here, and so I invite you to join me in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for gathering us in your name to listen to Peter Brodsky talk about connecting Dallas communities through partnerships and revitalization. We thank you for Peter's commitment to a stronger, safer, healthier Dallas. And we pray that we will gain new tools and perspectives for our own work on behalf of this city. We thank you for the women of St. Michael who share their gifts, expertise, and abundance in countless ways in this church and in the community. We thank you that they are challenging us to bridge the divide so that we will recognize our interconnectedness and unity with all your people. We thank you for St. Michael Church and its commitment to building Christian disciples for a transformed community. Apart from your grace and strength, we are unable to fulfill the mission that you have given us in your Son, Jesus Christ. Be with everyone in this room tonight. For those who are tired, give them rest. For those who are distracted, give them focus. For those who are discouraged, give them hope. And for those who are joyful, increase their joy. Now bless your servant Peter, that he may share a good word with us, and that we may be strengthened and encouraged in our own callings. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Good evening, and thank you for coming out on this very cold and wet night. I'm Zoe Hurt, this year's president of the Women of St. Michael, and welcome to our fourth event in our speaker series titled Bridging the Divide, a 5-part lecture series addressing some of the structural divides in America today and providing some hopeful solutions. Topics include tonight's presentation with Mr. Peter Brodsky on connecting Dallas communities through partnerships and revitalization, public education in America, acculturation in North Texas, faith and science, and politics. This topic was born out of my concern about the negative direction public discourse has taken in our country and my desire to help change in any small way the tenor of that discourse for the better. The Women of St. Michael have 3 events left rounding out the year, which can all be found on this lovely card here, available outside on one of the tables. We have our Mardi Gras party in 10 days on Friday, February 3rd on the Levee in the Design District, and it will feature the band Emerald City Elevation. Be sure to purchase your tickets on our website as this event is quickly selling out. Saturday, March 4th, we will hold our annual Mother-Daughter Tea at Jubilee Park and Community Center during Women's History Month. If you wish to volunteer for this event, a sign-up genius will be posted online shortly. And last, but by no means least, our annual luncheon with our final speaker in this series will be held Monday, April 24th at Pegasus Park, featuring Ambassador Kay Bailey Hutchinson, who will be talking about bridging the divide in politics and foreign policy. Our honorary chair for this year is none other than the fabulous Jeff Rice. Tickets for this event will be available from our website as of February 6th, just after the Mardi Gras party. I want to thank my truly wonderful programming chairs, Alison Bovard and Diana Newton, for making this series possible. Alison will be introducing tonight's speaker, Mr. Peter Brodsky. Alison has had numerous roles at St. Michael's. She taught either godly play, catechesis, or Sunday school for 13 years. Alison served on the rector search committee that called our 8th rector, the Reverend Chris Garata, to our parish. Currently, she serves as the Mission and Outreach Co-Chair and is the Mission and Outreach Liaison to North Dallas Shared Ministries, while also driving for Meals on Wheels. Alison is a former Woman of St. Michael president and is a newly elected member of our vestry. In short, Alison is an integral part of the fabric of St. Michael's. Please help me welcome Alison Bovard to the podium to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Zoe. That was lovely. A bit of business before I start with my introduction. There are note cards in the pews in front of you, white note cards, so as the evening progresses, if you want to ask a question, maybe write a question down that you'd like to ask Peter at the end. We'll have some time. We'll save time for questions. So our speaker tonight, Peter Brodsky, is a successful businessman who co-founded HBC Investments, a firm focused on investing in growth-oriented companies. He had previously been a partner at the private equity firm of HM Capital Partners and its predecessor, Hicks Muse, where he focused on the media industry and was responsible for managing over $2.6 billion of equity investments. Peter is also a much admired community leader. He's currently the board chair of Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance, which is the lead agency of Dallas and Collin County's homeless response system. He serves on the board of KIPP Texas Public Schools, a network of 59 public charter schools with nearly 34,000 pre-K to 12 students in Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. He's also on the advisory board of KIPP Texas Dallas-Fort Worth, which includes 7 schools serving over 3,200 pre-K to 12 students in southern Dallas. He's a member of the Dallas Assembly and has served on the boards of North Texas Public Broadcasting, AT&T Performing Arts Center, Vogel Alcove, and Dallas Symphony Orchestra. He's served on the City of Dallas's Animal Advisory Commission, which advises Dallas Animal Services, and where he may have gotten his first taste of politics by focusing on the loose dog crisis in southern Dallas. 7 years ago, Peter acquired the old Southwest Center Mall, previously the RedBird Mall, and he has committed himself to redeveloping the mall and the surrounding area to restore it to a place of pride and quality in the community. Peter has been working to bridge the educational divide for years through his work with KIPP, and now he's working to bridge geographic, financial, and community divides by bringing development and investment across the Trinity River to southern Dallas. Peter has a reputation for being a kind, humble, and generous person with a very big heart, and reading the December Texas Monthly article about Peter and RedBird, I found my introduction. Willis Johnson, radio personality and political consultant, said of Peter, "I think Peter is committed to seeing the playing field become equitable. That's just the person he is. I'm not making Peter out to be Jesus, but he's a good man." It's my great pleasure to introduce Peter.
Very nice introduction. I was told I have to stand here, here, or here, but I'm going to start out here. Oh, you know what I forgot? I need to do this clicker for the slides. Sorry. Oh, here it is. All right. Observation is not my strength. Okay, so what I want to do tonight is I'm going to kind of run you through the RedBird development. There are some slides in here that may or may not be relevant to the topic, but the reason why I want you to understand the development is because it says a lot about sort of the philosophy that myself and our team have developed in terms of building support in the community. Because what I can absolutely guarantee you is that when a white North Dallas developer buys a large property in southern Dallas and tells the community, don't worry, it's going to be great, they don't believe it. And so we've had to be very, very intentional, and I think we've been pretty successful in building community support. And so, and the thesis for the whole investment is a key reason why. So this is a perception versus reality thesis. Oh, the other thing I should say is that I'm a faithful Apple Mac user, and the formatting may get screwed up on the inferior PC. So apologies in advance. So this is a really simple thesis, and it's a perception versus reality. Southern Dallas has people in North Dallas, which is where most of the money and power resides in the city of Dallas, have very particular perception of anything that goes on south of the Trinity or south of I-30, whatever you want to call the 50-yard line in Dallas. And that perception is not correct. This is the perception of the housing stock and the outdoor activities in southern Dallas. And this is a house about a mile or so from RedBird. That's Keast Park. Southern Dallas, just like North Dallas, while there is a lot of poverty, more poverty there than in North Dallas for reasons I'll get into, there are also broad swaths of middle-class people, people who choose to live there, live in very nice homes with nice cars, but when you drive around the commercial areas, there's nothing. It's payday lending, it's dollar stores. I mean, there's nothing that you'd want. And so there's a supply-demand imbalance. The land is very cheap as a result of the perceptions, and so that's where the investment part comes in. I want to take a minute to sort of illustrate, going over to the right-hand X, to illustrate Southern Dallas. So the first thing is a vocabulary lesson. It is not called South Dallas. South Dallas is that neighborhood near Fair Park. It's about the size of Highland Park. The rest of the 208 square miles is not South Dallas. There's Oak Cliff, there's Pleasant Grove, there's Keastwood, there's Elder Oaks, there's Bishop Arts, there's a million different neighborhoods. None of them are South Dallas except for South Dallas. If you've ever been to St. Philip's, that is in South Dallas. They call it sunny South Dallas. Why does this matter? My wife was at a friend's house once, and the friend said, "How are things going in South Dallas?" And my wife said, "It's Southern Dallas." And she said, "Who cares?" And my wife said, "Where do you live?" And she said, "I live in Highland Park." And she said, "And if I dared to suggest that you lived in University Park, how would you feel?" She said, "I don't live in University Park. I live in Highland Park." It matters because people's neighborhoods matter to them. And when a North Dallas person, even with the best of intentions, ventures into Oak Cliff and starts calling it South Dallas, you've already lost your audience. So this is but one example of the misunderstanding of Southern Dallas. So RedBird is located right here. It's at the intersection of I-20 and Highway 67. It is the exact mirror image of the Galleria, which is at the intersection of 635 and the tollway. Now, here's another example, an example of how Southern Dallas has been otherized, for lack of a better word. The LBJ Loop around Dallas is mostly called 635, but at the southern part of the LBJ Loop, it's called I-20. It's not, it doesn't need to be I-20. Yes, I-20 goes across, but it's very much part of the loop. When you're driving somewhere around Balch Springs, it says leaving 635, entering 20, and you haven't even exited or changed a lane. Why did they do that? I can't tell you exactly why. What I do know is that the policy of exits and service roads was entirely different on those two different highways. North Dallas with 635 got plentiful exits and service roads. And what happened there? Development. I-20 was built with no exits in the city of Dallas. Okay? Just drive on through. And when they added exits later, there were no service roads added. So you have a mall here, the only mall in southern Dallas, and you can't access it from I-20. And that's true across Dallas. They are now adding service roads. But that's an example of how southern Dallas was treated differently than North Dallas. And it's an example of why there are so many negative perceptions about southern Dallas now. So anyway, that's the thesis. I guess the other thing I'll say is, I live in Preston Hollow. I live at Walnut Hill between Midway and Inwood. It's not very far from Vickery Meadow, right? But Preston Hollow has nothing to do with Vickery Meadow sort of socioeconomically. If there is a crime in Vickery Meadow, nobody says, oh my God, I'm never going to Preston Hollow again. But if there is a crime in South Dallas, all of southern Dallas gets blamed. Everyone thinks that entire 200 square miles is dangerous. And it's got 800,000 people and 200 square miles. It couldn't all be dangerous. But it's all, the amenities would have you believe that it's universally poor. Okay, so if you have a thesis that you want to provide quality amenities in a community that can afford them, desires them, and deserves them, RedBird is really the perfect place to locate. It is the only covered mall in southern Dallas. It's located at the intersection of two major highways. When segregation was really violently enforced in Dallas, RedBird was the area where the black professional class lived. And so there's money in the area. And RedBird, because it was one of the only really high quality amenities that was provided in the southern half of the city, it has a deep cultural resonance. The worst thing the prior owners of RedBird ever did was change the name to Southwest Center Mall, because the neighborhood of RedBird was really offended. And I'd say the black community in general was offended. They knew that this owner was trying to distance itself from the community. And the first thing we did was bring it back to RedBird. So it was a very, very popular mall. It was a very successful mall. It really began to go downhill in the late 90s when there began to be black flight out of Southwest Dallas into the southern suburbs. That's really when DeSoto and Duncanville and Cedar Hill switched from being predominantly white to being what they are today, which is about 60% black. They were searching for better schools, as lots of people do, and with that population went Dillard's and JCPenney. And once you've lost two of your anchors as a mall, your business model doesn't work, and it really began to kind of circle the drain, but it never died. And it never died because it's the only covered mall in southern Dallas. There aren't a lot of shopping opportunities. And there's been a strong desire in the community to bring it back. And what we want to bring it back to is the spirit of what it was. It's obviously not going to continue to be a 1 million square foot mall, because retail doesn't do that, and Macy's is never coming back, et cetera. But it was a high quality place for southern Dallas families to shop and be entertained. And so what we're trying to do now is use that real estate and use that location to provide the amenities that people today want that will cause them to gather. So I've really covered most of this. RedBird is closer, slightly closer to downtown than the Galleria. Another misperception that it's really far away. I've driven 40 minutes, deep into Frisco to go to a soccer or lacrosse or basketball game. I've had a parent say, oh my God, RedBird is so far away. I'm like, we just drove 40 miles to get here. You don't think Frisco is far away. RedBird, it takes me less than 25 minutes to get from my house to RedBird every day. It's got a very attractive audience. This is actually a little bit outdated. We have now gathered very, very accurate cell phone information. The average income of the population that comes to RedBird every day is $75,000 to $100,000 a year. It's not a poor community. So there's plenty of money there. There are a ton of community assets there. Within a 10 to 12 minute drive, you've got 5 different colleges: UNT Dallas, Paul Quinn, Dallas Baptist, and then two Dallas College campuses. And then you've got most of the African American megachurches in this city are within 2 miles of RedBird. So you have people coming into the community all the time. Again, after church, what do people want to do? They want to eat. Where can they eat? Not at RedBird. Not anywhere near, because there's no restaurants. And then limited competition. We opened a Starbucks in 2018. It is the only freestanding Starbucks in southern Dallas. A 208 square mile area with 800,000 people, and we are the only one. There's there's a kiosk at UNT, there's one at Methodist, there's one inside of a Target. So there are 3 kiosks in that area, but this is it. And it is a top performer in the city. It does substantially more business than Highland Park Village Starbucks, right? So there's money there. There's not a single movie theater in southern Dallas. There is one hospital to cover that whole area, Methodist. Think of what we have in North Dallas: Medical City, Presby, Baylor, UT Southwestern, Children's, Parkland. Those are just the hospitals. They're one hospital. There is nowhere to work. 90 to 95% of the gross leasable office space in the city of Dallas is north of I-30. So there's no amenities at all in that area. And that's what we're trying to bring to RedBird, all of these amenities that people want. So I'm going to take a minute and talk about the community. I mentioned already that nobody was thrilled hearing that some white guy had bought RedBird. There was a lot of resistance about it. There was a lot of skepticism, a lot of cynicism, and well earned. And the way we dealt with that was by meeting with as many people as we could and having an open and honest discussion. And the way I would begin every single meeting, and I must have had 60 or 80 meetings in the first 6 months. And some of them were one-on-one, and some of them were in churches like this, and some of them were in libraries. There was great community interest because the community is on the lookout for how they're going to get screwed. They are ready for it. And I began every meeting by saying, I realize that seeing a white guy up here that just bought a prize asset in your community does not thrill you. I understand it. It's well-deserved. I understand the history of this city. And I want you to know that I've got one goal, which is quality. But quality what? You have to tell me. I'm not going to tell you what you need. And the tension would go out of the room, and we'd begin to have a conversation about what people wanted and what was realistic. But just the acknowledgement of the truth was really, really important, because most people don't want to acknowledge the truth. I was saying earlier, most people don't want to admit their biases. And when people tell me that they don't have a racist bone in their body, I want to roll my eyes, because everybody has biases. You can't grow up in this country and not have implicit biases. They are drilled into our heads from the day we're born. And everybody has them, including the people who live around RedBird. But if you're honest with people about your biases and you have a growth mentality about it, people are very willing to meet you where you are. And so through that dialogue, we were able to build trust. We got some great ideas from the community. We've implemented the ones that we could. I had to break the news to them that they would never get a cheesecake factory, which was the number one thing that people wanted. But Cheesecake Factory knows that everyone will drive up to North Park to go to that Cheesecake Factory, and they're not going to put another one in. I had to acknowledge to people that they would not get a Whole Foods because Whole Foods decides where it's going to put its grocery stores based on college graduation rates, and the college graduation rates weren't high enough. It wasn't that they didn't deserve a Whole Foods. It was that wasn't going to happen, so let's figure out how to get as close to that as possible. What I did promise was that we wouldn't put an Aldi. Not that there's anything wrong with Aldi, but it's not what the community is looking for. And just another example of sort of the biases that people have. People would say to me, you should put a grocery store there. It would be amazing. And I'll say, yeah, we really want one. I think an Aldi would be perfect there. And I'd say, well, we're really thinking more like a Central Market, something like a Whole Foods. Why do they need that? That actually, someone said that to me. Why do they need that? That is the going in bias. That black people don't buy fruits and vegetables, they only buy sneakers. I used to ask people, why do you think there's no restaurants in this area? Oh, because black people don't tip, so they can't get their wait staff to stay. That's stupid. The reason was because there's no offices, so there's no lunchtime crowd. And when there's no lunchtime crowd, restaurants generally don't work. You need 2 meals. So what we're trying to do is bring a lunchtime crowd. So, the community has been really, really, really important. The other thing I'll say is that they can tell a mile away, people can tell a mile away if you're just trying to check the box. And so, for instance, with our MWBE, our Minority and Woman-Owned Enterprise effort, we made a commitment to the city of Dallas that we would do 40% MWBE numbers on our construction. And the dirty little secret of MWBE is that it's really easy to check the box, and the biggest recipient or the biggest beneficiary of MWBE work in the city of Dallas, white women. So it was really designed to help all underserved communities, but black-owned businesses get about 1% of the MWBE dollars spent in this city, right? That's really bad. And so we've had to be really intentional about trying to make sure that the black-owned businesses in the area are given an equitable playing field. Usually MWBE, it's like, oh, I forgot to do that, quickly send out the information to a bunch of minority firms, but they're 2 weeks behind and they're never going to be able to bid. We've got over 50% MWBE participation. Most of that is African American, and we've had terrific experiences. So when you give people an even playing field, you're going to find that your numbers just work out. And if you're trying to check the box, people can tell. Okay, so real quick, just as a side note, it has nothing to do with bridging the divide, but this is the parcel when we bought it. Every color is a different owner. I didn't realize that malls are not all owned by the same entity. Most malls, the anchor stores own their own property. And so what we bought originally was the red, and then what we own today is the red. But we've had to do about 15 different transactions to get enough critical mass. It's part of the reason why it's been so hard to redevelop that property. The city's been a phenomenal partner. They can be painful to deal with sometimes, but they really understand why this is an economic necessity. And I'm going to tell you why this is an economic necessity, because you can get tired of hearing about Southern Dallas, because we've been talking about it for a long time, and you can get tired of hearing that Southern Dallas is going to get a disproportionate amount of bonds and things like that. But what you can never forget is the reason why we're in that situation is because North Dallas got a vastly disproportionate amount of money for decades. Now, in some ways, that's not our problem. None of us did that. I'll tell you why it's our problem. Because the city of Dallas had a policy of only developing north of I-30. And north of I-30 was greatly developed. Well, guess what happened? We ran out of room. So then we went to Addison and Plano and Frisco, and now we're in Prosper. Guess who doesn't pay City of Dallas property taxes? Anyone in those cities. And so it's really come back to screw the city that we had those policies, because now we have 60% of the population living in 45% of the land mass of the city, North Dallas, paying 85% of the property taxes. And Southern Dallas uses a disproportionate amount of city services because it's been so underdeveloped and contributes only 15%. So if we want to survive as a city, we have to disproportionately invest in the South and turn it into Frisco. That is why the city has to do this, and it's going to take 25 or 30 years to do that, so none of us can get tired of hearing about Southern Dallas. And the city understands that. So 5 years later, we've got medical, we've got retail, we've got some restaurants, we've got about 2,000 people working at RedBird every day. We turned the whole top floor of the mall is basically a call center. The old Sears building is a UT Southwestern clinic. The old Dillard's has Parkland on the first floor and offices on the second floor. So it's still a work in process, but we've basically reutilized the buildings to turn them into the amenities that people wanted. So this is what it looked like in 2006, and this is the same view today. We've cut in streets. We built an apartment building. This is the aforementioned Starbucks. We've got a green space. UT Southwestern is kind of in the upper left-hand corner, and it's coming alive. And the one thing we've never, ever, ever strayed from is quality, because the minute we stray from it, the community will not accept it. They know what second class looks like, and they don't want second class. Who wants second class? When the Starbucks opened, Sharon Grigsby of the Dallas Morning News wrote a piece that I thought was one of the most insightful things I'd ever read, and it was really sad. She said, we had this grand opening, and there were a lot of people from North Dallas and a lot of people from Southern Dallas. A lot of white people, a lot of black people. And everybody walked into that Starbucks and was surprised, because we built it out really nicely. It looks, honestly, it's nicer than the Highland Park Village one. It's big, it's got a conference room, it's got polished concrete, it's got leather furniture, it's really nice looking. It's kind of brick and glass. And the white people were shocked that there would be something this nice in southern Dallas. They were kind of expecting a crappy little, pardon me, a crap, just a not a very nice, environment. And the black people were shocked that something this nice would have been provided to them in their community, that they would be provided this dignified, upscale environment for them. This is because it's really not about gentrification. It's not about attracting people to move there. I think West Dallas is more that. Bishop Arts is more that. But this is really about serving the existing community. And people were shocked at the UT Southwestern ribbon cutting, because UT Southwestern brought their A game. And they really created a beautiful, beautiful building. They spent like $250,000 on art. They really, really treated this the way they would treat anything on their main campus. People literally were crying during the ribbon cutting ceremony because they couldn't believe that this was being provided to serve them. It was so different than everything else in that environment. And I think I've gone my 45 minutes. That's what I'm going to leave you with, is how sad it is that that community, when it receives something high quality, it's like touching a wound. And the North Dallas community, when it sees that, it has cognitive dissonance. It doesn't make sense to people. Every time I meet someone at Starbucks, it's like, wow, this is really nice. And there's a line. Every time people say that. Who says that in Highland Park? No one, because it's expected to be nice and have a line. So that's my story. I'm happy to take any questions you want, if you have any. And thank you very much for the opportunity to address you.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah, we could sit here for quite a while, I think, and watch the rest of these slides. Again, there are note cards out and a few people walking around with baskets to collect them if you have questions. While you're writing your questions, I have one to start. You talked about the imperative to develop Southern Dallas. Are you seeing other developers now who are watching you and seeing what's going on and saying, okay, it can be done, I want to get involved? Do you see that happening? And part two, are you hearing from people from other places who are seeing this as a model that could be, are you seeing people from other cities coming and saying, hey, what are you doing?
So I think there was a development announced near UNT Dallas that looks terrific. It hasn't really started yet, so I'm not sure if it's going to go off the ground. The answer is I haven't seen a lot of it yet. I think people are still waiting to see if it's successful. I'll also say that biases are very, very sticky. And the rationalizations people can come up with to justify their own biases are entertaining. And I say that because it wouldn't surprise me if people said, oh, well, RedBird worked, but that's a one-off thing. It won't work other places, and find some reason that this is unusual. And the anecdote I have about that is that when we opened Starbucks, my development partner, Terrence Maiden, called up a restaurant that he knew, a restaurateur, and said, we're getting a Starbucks, you should come to RedBird. And the guy said, Starbucks will never work there. And Terrence said, well, I'll call you after it's been open. If it's working, will you come take a look? Sure. So 6 months later, Starbucks is killing it. And Terrence calls him up and says, Starbucks is doing great. You said you would come. He goes, Starbucks works everywhere, right? So that bias, he just couldn't make the connection. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it takes a while. In terms of being sort of looked at nationally, I'd say it's more for the mall conversion than going into an underserved community. I think people are really interested in the idea of using those big buildings for office or medical, and using that as a way to draw people in, much less about sort of serving an underserved community.
Okay, thank you. Another question that's actually health related for the community, and again, it's sort of two-part. How important is it to have Parkland and UT Southwestern there, or involved, and related because of the health issue also, and we talked about this, why is it so difficult to get a grocery store?
Yeah. Okay, so on the health, it's incredibly important. If you take the average lifespan in 75205 and compare it to the average lifespan in 75215, which is South Dallas, Joel, what do you think the difference is? 24 years. 24 years. Okay? So access to medical care isn't the only issue, but it is an issue. The death rate from breast cancer is 2 to 3 times higher south of I-30 than north of I-30. Access to mammography. So having convenient, accessible health care is critical. In terms of the grocery store, there are some legitimate reasons why it's hard to get a grocery store and some reasons that I think are illegitimate. The legitimate reasons are that southern Dallas is much less dense. So you've got 40% of the Dallas population spread out over 54% of the land mass versus 40% in 45% of the land mass. So there's less density. And the demographics aren't as good. And groceries a razor-thin margin business. The issue is that the reason why grocers don't want to come, as one grocer said to me, the numbers don't work. Okay, why don't the numbers work? What are your assumptions in your model? Well, we're assuming low sales, no growth, and high theft. Okay, no wonder your numbers don't work. Why are you assuming those things? Well, that's just what happens in those communities. So there's a lot of bias. And because it's such a razor-thin margin, there's very, very little room for error. And in this market, it's a lot easier to go to Prosper. The other thing is human psychology. And this doesn't just apply to grocery. It applies to almost every amenity. You got the way most big companies select their real estate sites is that they start out, they've got relationships with big brokerage firms, and those brokerage firms suggest sites based on the criteria of that company. You know, brokers get paid on commission, and they don't want to be fired. And so there's a reluctance to suggest something that might be controversial or might take a long time. So first the broker has to overcome their biases. Then they have to convince their main contact at the company to overcome their biases. And then that person has to go advocate internally to the real estate committee to overcome whatever biases they've got. So there's no reward for being a hero like that. It's just easier to go elsewhere. And the fact of the matter is that almost every major lease that we've signed happened one of two ways. it was either a top-down initiative of the CEO who decided that he or she wanted to be there, or there was a senior African-American executive in the organization that was able to see the actual opportunity and then had motivation to advocate internally for the research to be done. That's almost 100% of any major leasing that we've had done. And everyone is doing well, so it's justified, but getting people to make those decisions is very, very difficult.
Thank you. This is a personal question. What drives you? Where does that come from?
I've been asked that before, and I don't really know. What I can tell you is that I grew up in a very privileged environment. I mean, I wasn't like, my father and mother weren't, independently wealthy, but my father's a New York City corporate attorney. He did fine. I went to the best schools. I graduated from college debt-free. So I've really never had an economic concern in my life. But I am very, very, very aware of how lucky I am. And I think the one thing I can pinpoint that to is my grandfather. I once asked him sort of what was the key to his success, and he was a very successful economist and investor. And he basically went through his whole life, and he was like, well, I was born a white male in 1919, and my parents sent me to Horace Mann and Harvard, and so I was given every opportunity. And then I served in the war, and then after the war, if you couldn't make money in the 1950s in America as a well-educated white man in New York City, like, you weren't trying. And he kind of went through his whole career, and everything he attributed his success to had nothing to do with him. Now, he was a very brilliant man, but he really looked at his life as he took advantage of opportunities, but he had opportunities. And I see people who are every bit as smart as I am, and they don't have opportunities, and I find it, unacceptable. And I look at my own kids, and I mean, they've got 10 safety nets underneath them. And they just get chance after chance after chance after chance, and they should, but most kids don't. So that's what I attribute it to.
Okay, thank you. How do you walk the line between the economic return of gentrification and the desire to have people be able to afford to stay in their homes and in their neighborhoods? We're seeing the squeeze happen in other places like West Dallas.
It's a great question. I mean, the flip answer is nobody lives at RedBird Mall, so our development isn't displacing anyone. That is a flip answer. One thing is we're lucky in that this is a very, very high home ownership part of the city, unlike West Dallas that was mostly renters. And so people's taxes may go up, but it's not like their rent is going to go up immediately. And if their taxes do go up because their property values go up, when they sell their house, they're going to have created some wealth for their families. So some of it is luck. The other thing is we're really trying to lift all boats. I mean, we have created a couple thousand jobs in the community, and that lifts people up. Just even if you had a job before, before you were taking the bus an hour and a half to Las Colinas to your call center job, and now you can have a 5-minute commute to RedBird for your call center job, you've gotten 3 hours of your day back, and you can use that time to be with your kids, sleep a little more, go to school, have another job. And so we're trying to lift up the community. But at the end of the day, the city's goal is gentrification. If by gentrification you mean increasing the tax base. it is not necessarily displacement. And so what we're trying to avoid is displacement. We're aware that there will be some displacement. Not every boat will rise with the tide, but what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that is never improve cities, never improve communities. And I think it's really on the city and the state to come up with policies that protect people from gentrification, whether it's figuring out how to do land trusts or changing the law so that people who've owned a home for, say, 10 years or more, their taxes can't go up as fast, or something like that to protect communities. But it's an inevitability. Otherwise, there's no improvement.
Could you talk about the experience of trying to put the public daycare center into the old Macy's and some of the challenges of, I guess, DISD wouldn't sign off on it? What is that something, could that still happen, or, because it seems like it would be such a huge asset for the community.
Yeah, not with Dallas ISD. So just a little background. When we first decided to turn parts of the mall into professional uses, my office broker said, you got to come up with some cool amenities. You got to have a putt-putt golf course. You got to have a ropes course. There's got to be cool things for people to do. You know, we have this huge center court. And, you know, my thought was, man, the mother of all tenant amenities would be childcare, on-site childcare. And thinking about it further, you know, the three biggest impediments that working families have are transportation, healthcare, and childcare. So I've already mentioned that we're trying to solve the transportation issue by putting jobs in the community. We've talked about the healthcare. Imagine that you need your annual checkup, your annual mammogram, and instead of having to take the day off from work, you can leave work, walk downstairs, have your appointment at the Parkland Hospital, the Parkland Clinic, and then go back to work and only miss an hour of work. And then childcare was the other one. We had made a commitment to the community when we started out that we would donate 25,000 square feet to a community organization. And believe it or not, twice I got to the finish line with a governmental institution to give the space, and twice there was resistance from the board. In the case of Dallas ISD, the concern was that we would be putting small African American owned childcare centers out of business by competing with them, which is not true. There's massive unmet demand for childcare. And we're really going to be drawing mostly, the quid pro quo for giving the space was anyone who works in the RedBird complex gets first dibs on any open spots. But it just met with political resistance, and you know, the management team has to pick their battles with what they're going to go to battle with, go to battle over with the board, and it just got pushed from month to month to month to month to month until I finally just killed it, because it was dying a death by 1,000 cuts. We still have a desire to do that. We are working with a different childcare organization. I think we have a much better chance of getting it done this time.
Thank you. Hope so. Another question from the audience. Over the next 25 to 30 years, what will be some key milestones indicating Southern Dallas is transforming?
The location of a major corporate headquarters in Southern Dallas, not a warehouse, not a distribution center, not a call center, but a major corporation and their C-suite in Southern Dallas will be a major milestone. More housing, and I would say the cessation of Southern Dallas being mostly a community of color. I think we're not looking to displace anyone, but there's plenty of room. And when white North Dallas people are no longer afraid to go to Southern Dallas and no longer think it would be out of the question to live there other than Kessler Park, I think that will be a major milestone. I think when you start seeing the next generation of African Americans moving back from the suburbs into Oak Cliff will be a major milestone. So those are three. But the biggest one to me is the major corporation.
Headquarters. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so we're getting close to the time to move on to our reception, so thank you. We have one final question. It's kind of a two-parter.
Okay.
What other projects are you considering? Not that you're not done with this yet. And at the risk of sounding like Barbara Walters, is there anything you'd like to announce here tonight related to political ambitions that might be out there?
I am never going to do another real estate development ever. If I am, it will be in an advisory position only. And this is going to take a few more years. And no, Eric Johnson is going to run unopposed.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's Zoe.
Okay, well, thank you so very much. We have a small gift for you.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, from the St. Michael's Women's Exchange.
Thank you very much.
You no longer need to stand on an X.
Yes, the lights are on.
Please join us all in the parlor for a reception afterwards. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Oh, sure.